Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to finally show you guys my video of unboxing the November Dice Elves box. Now, to be honest, I had this box for a long time and I already filmed this video like over a month ago, but I totally forgot I had it filmed. So yeah, finally showing you the project I made with this. Now this box was delayed because they had some problems with making the mold, and I have to say it's worth it. From what I could see when I used it, the mold was actually really good. But let's have a look at the items in the box first. And the first item we have is some of their UV resin for use with silica molds. And then we get these nail glass papers. I don't know if they're actually made out of glass. I think they're made out of plastic and you're supposed to use them for nail art, but I think they would look great suspended in resin. Next up we have some pigments, and we actually get a bonus pigment, the violet one, as a thank you for waiting this long for this box, and I really appreciate them giving us this extra pigment. And we also get this really beautiful greenish iridescent pigment and some black Morandi. And we get some leaf embeds. Since this kind of is supposed to be the autumn box, this totally makes sense, and actually they're so pretty. There's so many different colors that look like spring and autumn leaves and stuff, and they have so many different effects. I really like this. Next up we have this sad tree embed. There is lots of supports left on it from it being made, and also some of the leafy parts sadly broke up, but nothing I couldn't fix with some gluing, so it should be fine. And we also get this really adorable sitting kitty cat, which is also a nice white embed. Next up we have this syringe, and this is actually a straight top syringe, so it doesn't have a pointy end, and I guess it's for injecting resin into a mold. And we also get this silvery type glitter. And our first mold of this day is actually this tiny dice mold. Sophie and Toffee made a tiny die mold before, but it didn't really work. You could get some dye out of it, but they were just like all bubbly and the mold wouldn't hold well together. But this one looks made way better with some registration points and some of these cool contact points inside of the dice that will hopefully let them be more even. And I guess the syringe is meant for the tiny holes on top of this dice mold. Our resin this time is Sophie and Toffee's 3:1 part epoxy resin. And our last mold, and the mold I'm most excited about, is this giant D20 mold. And this mold is very interesting because it's actually a 3-part mold. So we get the top with these handy registration marks so we can line it up properly. And then we get a second top thing that we can take off, and I guess this is meant to be used so you can put in embeds and stuff and then put it on and fill the rest of the die. And this is a pretty great and smooth mold. I have to admit that myself. And in the booklet we have Sophie and Toffee's social media information, and this booklet actually has the information on the molds first, which is interesting. So we see all the information for the huge D20 and for the mini dice, which is really handy. And the next pages actually show us the items that are in this box besides the molds. And on the last page we actually have some of the chimes mold making kit thing. I guess it was August box, I think. Yeah, it actually mentions that it's August box, but yeah, I think all of those creations look really cute. But anyways, let's get crafting. I first wanted to start off with a smaller project, so I thought, why not make some mini dice and test out this minty iridescent pigment. So I just whipped up some UV resin with a couple of drops of the pigment, and then I used the syringe to pipe it into the mold, I guess. And I have to say, it was painfully slow to fill up this syringe, but it actually filled up the mold really good, and the air bubbles weren't really that huge. I guess because maybe the pressure in the syringe forced them up on the top of the resin, or at least that's what I'm imagining actually. But yeah, it's like taking some force to insert the resin, but it filled up pretty quickly and pretty neatly. And as you can see, I actually put some tape around the mold because it was a little bit loose, but with the tape it held up really well and there wasn't really any leak, and it actually cured pretty well despite the mold being so thick. And the molding was really easy too. The only thing I had to do was a lot of cleanup because of the tiny bit of spilling, but it was easy to cut off with just a knife since it was really thin. And I have to say, I love the iridescent effect. It's really pretty. Of course, the dies weren't perfect. There were some tiny little air bubbles, but nothing that would really bother. You couldn't use them properly as game dice anyway, because they just would be really hard to sand down, so they would be balanced with the tiny edges. Maybe they would be great for potion dice, so the ice you can put into a glass bottle and shake then, or just for decoration. And I decided to make mine into charms, so I just drilled a couple of holes and put them on some jewelry wires. And I made a necklace piece with multiple of the dies, and then I used the D10 and the D100 for making earring dies. But now let's actually get into the huge project. And since this was an autumn theme box and we got this really pretty leaves, I decided why not put a tree inside the dice. I'm not sure if the details will actually be visible through the face of the die, just because there's so many and the resin is actually really reflective when there's no color in it, but I really wanted to try. So I made this copper wire tree, and it's just like a simple twisted wire tree, and I made sure to constantly double check if the size would fit inside of the mold. And I basically just detailed the top of the tree, so the branches, and for the roots I just basically left the raw wires since I wanted to like really embed it into the die anyways. So I started off with the first layer and I mixed some UV resin with this crushed glass, and I added some brown pigment just to make it like a kind of dirt earth color. And then I also added some of this colored moss, and this stuff stained my hand so badly since the moss has a lot of moisture in it, and the colorant like really didn't want to leave my hands. But anyways, I think it was worth it in the end. So I placed a teeny tiny bit inside of the mold, popped the bubbles and just fixated the tree with the roots before adding some more of the mossy resin on the bottom to cover up the wires a little bit. After the tree was properly set in place, I added a tiny bit of resin to more of the moss and I added it as leaves on top of the wire, constantly adding some, curing it, adding some and checking if it would actually fit once I put the lid on top of the mold. And after a while I was finished. And it was actually time to decorate some more with the shiny leaves they added. So I picked out my favorite leaves, added a tiny bit of clear resin on the bottom and, you know, just placed these beautiful shiny little different colored leaves on the bottom of the tree, kind of like they fell off of the tree since it was autumn. Now, of course, they don't really fit the size of the tree, but you know, who cares? It's art. Now, I wanted this die to come up perfectly, so I tried to make a clear shell, which would have worked if it weren't for the thickness of the silicone. So what happened was that at first it looked great, but since I was placing it upside down, I wasn't curing the sides quick enough, so all of the resin ran to the bottom and actually, plugged up the huge opening, and it actually took quite a while to dry. So I had to drill some holes on top and syringe the resin in, and this took ages and there would be some huge bubbles because I couldn't get all of them out. Also, it seems like the UV resin inside didn't spread evenly. When it ran down the sides it left some gaps, so there's now some huge bubbles, but you know, nothing that's too bothersome since this is only for display purposes. So in the end I used some UV resin and filled in all of the largest holes. And it turned out fine. It wasn't as shiny as I hoped for, and of course there's the bubbles on top, but you know, I just imagine this is maybe a magical underwater tree and the bubbles are just like magical bubbles that come from the moss all around the tree. Anyways, this is everything for today, and here are my finished projects. Again, I'm so happy about how the iridescent pigment turned out, and I am so happy that actually the tiny die mold this time worked way better and left way less air bubbles. I guess it's a bit more difficult to use since you have to use a syringe, but if that minimizes air bubbles, it's all well. Now, sadly, it's really hard to show you guys the tree inside the die, and you can see some of the faces that I've touched up because they're a bit more rough. But yeah, the faces of the die makes it super hard and super trippy to look at this tree, but I think it actually turned out really pretty. And I'm super happy with this. I will definitely make some more environments inside of the die, maybe not as detailed as this one, since it would be a shame to not be able to see the details, but I think it's quite an interesting display piece, and the leaves on the bottom look really pretty inside of the resin. So yeah, this was a really fun project, and I'm so glad that they managed to finally finish the mold and that it actually works this great. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below if you've gotten this box and if you got frustrated by the waiting time too for a little while. in the end, as I said, I still think it was super worth it because this is a beautiful mold. But yeah, let me know, what will you put inside of your die? And maybe what did you use it for? Is it a die that you actually use for D&D, or is it a die that you use for display purposes only? I'd really love to hear. I hope you're having a great day, and I see you next time. Bye!